All right, don't touch that burner. It's still hot. All right, everybody. You're listening to another episode of the Advantage Survival Podcast, episode number 31, and today we have stoves for the wild and beyond. That's right. All right, I'm talking about stoves that I have researched myself. These are stoves that I use myself. You know, I've purchased these stoves that I'm going to talk about today, and I got to tell you that I have received no money from any of the manufacturers of these products. So I just want to say that, I use these things regularly. So I'm going to talk about them. We're going to go through them and, kind of give you my philosophy of use, if you will, and hopefully you get something out of it. But before I get started, I want to thank our sponsor today, NorthwestHomesForSale.net. My incredible wife, Kelly, is a realtor and global property specialist serving the fine people of the Pacific Northwest and folks around the globe. With her worldwide referral network of over 100,000 agents, she can help you find a great agent near you. Whether you're buying or selling your home or looking for that perfect homestead, Kelly will help you achieve your real estate goals. So check out our website at nwhomes4sale.net. And like always, I'll have a link in the show notes. All right, so let's get started. The first question I ask myself when I'm looking at a stove to purchase or a stove that I need for, whatever I'm doing, wilderness or urban, whatever it is, I ask myself, what am I going to use it for? What are my needs for acquiring this stove, and what do I expect out of my stove? And the obvious one is to boil water, and probably 99% of the things I do on a stove is boiling water. Unless I'm at home and I'm cooking or whatever, right? But if I'm out in the wild or in an urban disaster earthquake scenario, I'm probably going to be boiling water, and I'm going to be boiling water to, rehydrate food, but also to boil water to purify it. So depending on what the situation is, those are probably a couple of things I'm going to do. The other thing that I would, need it for would be, a lightweight solution for outdoor cooking, right? So again, if I'm backpacking, I don't want to carry a bulky stove. I don't want to carry a heavy stove. I want to carry a stove that is going to serve me, for the task at hand, right? So also, back in the search and rescue days, I needed a stove that was very dependable. It was a stove that had to be very durable, and it had to, it just had to work. It had to boil water because, a lot of times, you'd find a lost subject and, they may be mildly hypothermic or whatever, or just cold. But it was always good to be able to bust a stove out and rather quickly, boil some water up and get some warm fluids in somebody. And including myself when, I got cold or I needed a little warm up before I hit the sack and, try to catch some Z's for the night. I mean, I needed some warm liquids or some warm food, and boiling water and those kinds of things definitely helped. It's also a preparedness solution for my lights out kit. Check out episode 20 if you want to hear what I, keep in my lights out kit. But those are the kind of the questions I ask myself, and how I rationalize a stove purchase and the use of a stove. So that said, I put my stoves in three different classifications: a wilderness backpacking type stove, an urban prepping type stove, and I have a list called, my wish list stoves. And like any good gear junkie, I have a wish list and things I want to get. So, and the reason I keep a wish list on not just stoves but other equipment or gear that I may use, I do it to enhance the depth of my preps or my gear for outdoor adventures, right? So I keep a wish list. Stoves are on it, and there are there's a few things on them. There's one stove in particular that we'll talk about that is definitely on my radar screen, and one that I do want to try out here in the near future. All right, it's like having 3 ways to start a fire, right? I want to have more than one stove to cook with, just in case one fails, if that's even possible with some of the stoves I'm going to talk about today. But you want to have a backup plan, if you will. All right, so let's get started talking about some stoves. Now, the stove I'm about to tell you about is a stove that I have had for over 10 years. And I have never in those 10 years and the hundreds of times I've used that stove and the countless search and rescue missions and trainings I've used it on, I've never had a problem with it. And that stove is built from Cascade Designs, and it's an MSR pocket rocket. And this thing is the bomb. It will take all kinds of abuses. And I can tell you a quick search and rescue training story for you. We were down near the University of Washington Pack Forest, down near the town of Elby here in South Pierce County. And we were just doing some helicopter training. And we had a Huey helicopter, and it landed, and, we were, getting on board the helicopter and throwing our gear in there, and, we'd take off, and we'd do a little sortie down the river, and they'd land, and we'd get out, and we'd do whatever training we were doing that particular day. But I remember getting on with my group, and, off we went, had a nice, beautiful day, nice flight down the river, awesome scenery. You could see Mount Rainier in all its glory there, just absolutely beautiful. Well, we landed down by the riverbank, and we hopped off, and we safely got away from the rotor blades, and turned around, and the next thing we know, we hear the chopper revving up, and it started to take off. And we jumped on the radio and said, "Hey, you got our backpacks with you? Can we have those? Because it's a long way back. If we have to walk." And they were cool with it, but they didn't want to land again, so they kind of drifted away from us a little bit and threw our gear out from about 100 feet. And, I spent the next 30 minutes picking up my equipment off the rocks alongside the river. I got it all, and I didn't have too much issue, but I remember my pocket rocket laying there, and, hey, no problem. It took the abuse from fall from a helicopter. So, it's just a bomb-proof stove, and what I love about the stove is that it's very glove-friendly. So, whether I'm wearing leather gloves, in the summertime, riding ATVs or, hiking, whatever it is, I can light the stove off and I can operate it using a glove without any issues. So I like that. I love the fact that it has fast setup. I can put this thing together in, 30 seconds maybe. I can have this thing up and running. And I kind of attribute the longevity of this stove, from, trying to take care of it. But, honestly, I haven't done really anything to it. I've never pulled any maintenance on it. But I think one of the key things is I use the proper fuel for the stove. I use the MSR IsoPro fuel canisters exclusively for this stove. And I do it because I think it burns great. I also do it for the variety of the sizes of canisters. They come in 4-ounce, 8-ounce, and 16-ounce canisters. And depending on what I'm doing, say, for example, I'm doing a day hike, I'd probably only take a 4-ounce canister with me because it's very lightweight. The stove itself is only, I'm guessing, don't quote me here, but I think it's only like 3.5 ounces. And it'll boil water pretty fast. It'll boil water in about 3.5 minutes. So that's kind of cool. It's not something I would... it wouldn't boil water as fast as my gas range in my kitchen, but, hey, it does the job, and it does the job every single time I ask it to. The other thing is if I'm, going on a winter, snowshoe trip, overnighter, or a few nights, whatever, if I'm spending a lot of time in the winter out, I'll take the 16-ounce fuel canister, pretty handy, or a few 8s, whatever. But I can carry more fuel on a Polk sled, pulling it behind me than in my backpack. So I'm okay loading it up a little bit. So that is the stove that has been my go-to stove for years. and I absolutely love it, and I would recommend it to anybody looking for a backpack stove. Now, you can certainly use this stove for search and rescue missions and trainings. I have. You could use it for backpacking. You could use it, if you're riding an ATV or a snowmobile. Certainly, it's a good survival stove because it's durable, it's dependable, and it's easy to use. So, again, great stove. Now, all of that said, let's move on to my next stove. The next stove in my toolkit. Again, it's an MSR Micro Rocket. I know, another MSR stove. And you're asking, well, if the Pocket Rocket was so great, why would you change? Why would you, move to another stove and use that as your go-to stove? Well, I'll tell you, it's because it's an MSR stove product. And again, I love it. The experience I have, for all the reasons I mentioned above, I think I will have the same response from the Micro Rocket as I had from the Pocket Rocket. And I only bought this stove to upgrade from the Pocket Rocket. It's not because the Pocket Rocket failed or it wasn't doing its job. I've actually taken the Pocket Rocket and put it in my Lights Out kit. And again, check out episode number 20 if you want to hear about my Lights Out kit. But I've moved the Pocket Rocket to my Lights Out kit, and that's where it lives now. Unless I, have a whim to pull it out and take it somewhere. But my new stove that is one of my dependable go-to stoves is going to be the MSR Micro Rocket. And, it's even smaller. It's, I think, an ounce or so lighter. I want to say 2.6 ounces maybe. I'm not sure, but it takes the same fuel canister. My particular stove came with one of those piezo lighters, a little clicky thing you push and you can ignite the flame rather quickly. I like that because that is glove friendly. I can take it, put it between two fingers of my glove, use my thumb, push it, spark, stove's ignited. I don't have to pull out a big lighter. I don't have to use a match. It's just really convenient to have that, and I keep it right in there in the case with the stove itself. So, yeah, it's another stove that I think will prove to be a bomb-proof stove, and we'll see how it stands the test of time. Both of these stoves I would have no problem with handing down to my son or daughter for their gear kit, or buying them the same type of stove for their adventures. So definitely a good stove. Applications for the stove, same as above. I would use it for search and rescue missions and trainings, backpacking, snowmobile, ATV riding, and I would consider it a stove for survival use, whether it's in an urban or a wilderness setting. I think the stove would do well in both situations. And I should mention, both of these stoves are really stable. I know there's a kit that you can buy that you can put on the bottom of the fuel canisters and help stabilize it. Honestly, I've never had to use it. I've never had any stability issues. I mean, if I put it on some, a decent surface, I've never had an issue with it. So definitely stoves to consider. And they're great in the wind too, and even in the rain. And I could tell you, even in the snow. I mean, I'm trying to think of a condition that I haven't used a stove in, and during the search and rescue time in my life, certainly sunny weather wasn't the majority of the time. So yeah, it was definitely the rain, snow, or just really windy, crappy weather. So definitely good stoves. All right, now let's get into some other stoves that I have and I use, and I have them for a little different reason. I have a wood gas stove, a wood gasifier stove, if you will, and you can read about the details of this stove. And I'll have links in the show notes for all these stoves, but it's called the Solo Stove. And what's cool about it is I don't have to carry any fuel for this stove. It's a wood stove, and you can take this stove, put the tinder in it. You can put some fuel wood in it. You can, put a little, Ultimate Survival Technologies wet fire in there if you want to help ignite it, or some fat wood even to help get the thing going. But you light this stove with stuff that you find around you. And for me, and where I live here in Western Washington, plenty of stuff, even in the rainy times, that I can find to burn in this stove. Now, the stove's heavier. It's 9 ounces. At least the one I have is about 9 ounces. And But again, I don't have to carry any fuel canisters. I don't carry any extra, thing with me when I use this stove. And I'll tell you when I use this stove. And sometimes, I won't say all the time, but sometimes I'll take both, either an MSR stove and this stove with me, or one of the other two that I'm going to mention today. It just really depends on, I don't know how I'm feeling on any given day, on what type of stove I'm using, but certainly what I'm going to do. I always take the Solo stove with me if I'm in a winter scenario where I'm on snowshoes or whatever. That stove's usually going to be with me. But the really cool thing about this stove, and the next two that I'm going to talk about, is they're quiet. They're quiet stoves. Now, the only thing I can say about the MSR Pocket Rocket and Micro Rocket are that loud. They're a camp backpack stove, and you're going to hear that when you light them up, and that's hasn't been a real issue for search and rescue training experiences. It just hasn't been a deal breaker. But if I'm out camping, let's say I'm taking an ATV up for 3 or 4 days, and I'm going to go camping with some buddies of mine, and I like to get up early. From years of working, I got up early at 3:30, 4:30 in the morning, and I can't break that habit even on vacation or whatever. So I'm up early. I'm usually the first one up at camp, and quite honestly, I want to have a cup of coffee, but I don't want to wake everybody up. And I like to watch a good sunrise just like the next person, and you only have so many sunrises in your life. So being able to fire up a Solo stove and have a fire flame burning in front of you, and being able to put a pot on that and boil some water is pretty cool. And being able to do it quietly, and warming up your hands if it's a really cold morning too. It's you can definitely do that. You can do it with any of these stoves, but certainly having that open fire wood burning flame in front of you is pretty cool. All right, so an application for a Solo stove would be certainly backpacking. I don't know. I think some of the ultralight backpackers probably use this stove too. It's 9 ounces. There are some other wood burning updraft gasifier stoves, if you will, that are probably lighter. I haven't really looked into too many of the other brands. I know there's a lot coming out on the market, but the Solo stove seems to be, for the price point, a pretty good value. And I think this is around $70, $69 or $70 for this stove. And I would definitely consider it if you're looking for a wood burning stove. All right, so let's talk about my next stove. And now we're moving into the alcohol stoves. All right, the first alcohol, well, I won't say the first alcohol. I built, 5 or 6 alcohol stoves, out of pop cans and, the aluminum beer bottle type cans. I've got, 3 or 4 different experimental versions that I've, actually built myself, and they all work pretty good. The white box stove, I think it's whiteboxstove.com. Again, I'll have links in the show notes. But that is, it's a small stove. It's only probably an inch and a half in diameter, and probably 1.5 inches, 2 inches tall. I don't have the exact dimensions. You can see that on their website. But, that's a good stove, and it's good because, I use heat, the stuff that you buy at the auto parts store, and I put that in there, an ounce or so in there, and I can light that off. But if I'm in with a group of, myself, another person, and maybe one more person, the flame spread on that stove is big. So I can have a larger pot to heat up and boil water. It's pretty handy. The stove comes with a thick aluminum base and a windscreen. And I've used that stove, I've probably used that stove 20, 30 times maybe. Out in the woods, out in the wild, and it's been a good, dependable stove. Have a little issue in really, really cold weather, lighting the alcohol up, but there's ways around that. We can get into that later, but it's a good stove. I would recommend the white box stove, and it's certainly one I own. It's certainly one I use. Now here's a stove that I've recently purchased, and I'm running it through some of the vetting process on my end. But the preliminary results that I'm seeing is it's a pretty doggone good alcohol stove. And it's the Fancy Feast stove. And it is a Fancy Feast cat food can with a few modifications. And it's a slower burn, kind of like, and I didn't mention it about the Solo stove. You can boil water with the Solo stove in about 8 or 10 minutes. A couple cups of water. This is about 6 minutes on a half ounce of denatured alcohol. But what's really good about this stove is it's extremely lightweight. It's only 24 grams. And, you carry 4 ounces of heat, and, you've got four meals you can cook up right there. You're boiling water relatively lightly. It's a popular stove with ultralight backpackers. It's one that you definitely should consider. And I'll have a link in the show notes for it. I can't remember who makes the stove. Let me look here. Let me check real quick online if I can find them here real quick. Zelf's Stoves, ZELPH''S Stoveworks. And again, I'll have a link in the show notes for them. But definitely a stove to check out. Now, like the white box stove, and probably the white box stove, and I would say the Solo stove too. But the Solo stove, you get some smell with it. It's a clean burning stove. I mean, you're not going to get a lot of smoke, maybe at the beginning or at the very end of the burn, but for the most part, it's a really extremely clean burn. But what the cool thing about it is, the white box stove, the Fancy Feast stove, and the Solo stove is they are excellent stealth stoves. Like I mentioned, they're quiet. There is no there's no roar when you fire these things up. They are just quiet. And if you want to enjoy nature, or you want to be stealthy and you don't want folks hearing you, the only thing you're going to hear out of these stoves is the water boiling. They are just extremely quiet. And they're pretty durable too. I mean, the white box stove is, bomb proof. You can step on it. You could probably drive over it and it wouldn't hurt it. The Fancy Feast is not so durable. It's a cat food can. You could probably bend it or warp it, but I think you could probably, ply it back into a shape that's still going to work. But, I'm excited about the stove. I'm excited about using it. I'm really excited about using it in the wintertime and, really, running it through its paces. It will be one that will be with me along with, the Micro Rocket and the Solo stove as well. Okay, so now let's switch gears a little bit and talk about some of the stoves that I would use in an urban or prepping application. And, the first stove I would recommend is probably any of the stoves I've already talked about. Like I mentioned with the Pocket Rocket, the MSR Pocket Rocket, that is in my Lights Out kit with extra fuel, and it's a go-to stove there. So, yeah, I would use that. Like any open flame in an urban situation, certainly if there was an earthquake and things were shaking, there were aftershocks, and you were trying to boil water, you want to be smart about what you're doing. You don't want to fire that thing off next to an open gas line or something like that. So you want to be careful. Common sense there, right? But the above stoves I would definitely consider for that. The other stove that I use to boil water, and I actually cook on this stove. I would make scrambled eggs or, stir fry or whatever, but it is going to be my gas range in my kitchen. If I can get back into my house after an earthquake, it's safe to do so, and I still have natural gas coming to my house. I may not have electricity, but I can light that stove off and, I'm cooking. I'm a happy camper, so yeah, definitely the gas range in my kitchen, and that might be cheating in this podcast, but honestly, it's a stove that I would use, certainly. It would be probably one of the main ones I'd go to just because, it's easy to use, right? I don't have to set up anything, and I don't have to screw a gas canister in it or, come up with the alcohol or the heat or whatever. All right, so moving right along, here's a stove that is in my Lights Out kit as well, and it's a stove that, I'm sure everybody has seen them. They're made by Gas One. I think that's the company. It's the Gas One GS-3000 portable gas stove. I'll have a link in the show notes. Now, this comes in a little, flimsy, but not, bomb-proof by any means plastic case. It's a metal stove. It's I don't know, it's probably 16 by 16 or 16 by 18, somewhere in there. Don't quote me on the exact dimensions, but it takes the little Gas One 8-ounce butane fuel canisters, a little bottle. It almost looks like a spray can of paint type bottle, and you drop this cartridge inside the stove. Close the cover for it, and you turn the knob just like the stove at home on your gas range at home, and it ignites, and you've got a burner that you can cook on, and it cranks out some pretty good heat. It's very popular for cooking. I know a lot of folks use them for cooking in their apartments or whatever. It's a very family-friendly stove. I mean, everyone knows how to use this thing, and that's kind of one of the cool features about it. I actually take this stove with me when I car camp with the family, or if I'm using an RV and camping and I want to have an extra burner. When I'm barbecuing or whatever, whether I'm doing RVing or I'm barbecuing out on my back deck, it's handy to have an extra burner outside, and that's a great stove for it. So it's not only a stove that you can use in a an urban prepping application, but it's certainly a stove that you can use every day. And the fuel canisters are pretty cheap. I think they're only, I think I paid under $1 for the fuel canisters, and I buy them by a case of 12 or whatever. Pretty handy. So check it out. Definitely a stove to consider. All right, now let's talk about a wish list stove, and it's a stove that I've been researching, and here's my why. Right, I'm asking myself why. Why do I need it, and what do I need it for? Well, I'm looking for a backup stove. Redundancy. I want to have 3 ways to start a fire. I want to have 3 ways to cook or boil a water, and maybe I want to have 10 ways to do that, but I like gadgets and cool things too. And this stove, it definitely has a cool factor to it, but it looks like it's built like a bomb. And it is a wood gas stove. It uses wood to burn. It's called the Silverfire Survival Rocket Stove. And where I live, I have unlimited fuel sources. I mean, I can find wood or organic matter to burn in this stove to boil water with. And there's a lot of different features that Silver Fox has, for their stoves, and different stove models. They're definitely a little on the pricey side. I don't know what this one costs off the top of my head, but it's a stove that I think can enhance my. It's a stove that I think can really enhance my urban preparedness cache, if you will. So it's one I'm looking at. And if anybody has used this stove or had some experience with this stove, please let me know. Shoot me an email at les@advantagesurvival.com and let me know what your thoughts are on this thing, because I'd be interested to see how other people have enjoyed it. And I'll certainly check out the online videos and see what people think about that. But that is one stove that is certainly on my wish list. Okay, moving on here. Moving on and kind of wrapping up the show here. I know this is it's going to be a little short podcast here for you, but let's talk about some key points about stoves, right? You need to find a stove that has, that will satisfy your cooking solution, if you will, and what stove is going to work for you in your application. There are so many stoves on the market, and it's worth looking at it. Again, like most of the gear in this spectrum of survival and prepping, there's a lot of choices, and there's good stuff and bad stuff. Hopefully I'm helping you look at some good stuff, but definitely do some research and check out the stoves that and ask yourself why you need them. What are you using it for? And is it something that you can pack away? Is it portable? Is it a more permanent solution? Whatever it is. The other thing is, when you're buying your fuel, say like I mentioned the canister fuels and the alcohol, safely store those fuels. Put them in a place that is safe, that's recommended by the manufacturer of the fuel. Be smart about what you're doing. Don't keep it by any open flame, and certainly keep the extra fuel away from your stove when you're using it. So be smart about it. I recommend a minimum of about 2 weeks worth of fuel. So if you're keeping your fuel around for a prepping or urban disaster type situation, or if you're bugging in, definitely, have at least 2 weeks worth of the fuel, and you can kind of figure out, 3 meals a day, how many ounces is going to take to burn this stuff. I know the canisters, I think an 8-ounce canister of the MSR fuel will burn, the IsoPro will burn about an hour. So, you can kind of figure out, if it takes 3.5 minutes, 4 minutes to boil a couple cups of water, you can kind of get a feel for how long it's going to take, or how long a fuel canister will last. And I, thinking about back, and I can't stop talking about the micro rocket and the pocket rocket, but I've never had a fuel canister failure either. I mean, they've always been very dependable. So just another side note there. All right, like all good preps, store your stoves in more than one location. If something happens to your house, keep it in the RV or the shed, and maybe you have a bug out location or an off-site storage location where you keep your preps, but make sure you keep extra stoves and fuels in those locations as well. So just another thought there. If your stove requires routine maintenance, make sure that you have the extra parts or the maintenance kit with you, on hand. Store it with the stove. Make sure you know where it's at and how to put them together. And if there's any specialty tools required, make sure you have those there too. Use your stoves regularly so you know how they work, right? Makes sense. I know how Pocket Rocket works because I've used it so many times, but my family may not know how to use the Pocket Rocket if they haven't used it in a long time. So take it out, have your kids come by, have them put it together, have your significant other put the stove together and get it fired up and boil some water. Just use them regularly. Just make sure they're working good, and, you get a feel for, how long it takes, and, where to set it up and what makes sense. It's always good to practice with your preps and your survival equipment. It's always good to know. Also, if there's other quality stoves in the market, do your research. So check that out. And let's not forget I won't say that this is a stove, but it is something that, if it's all you got, I'm going to tell you it works. All right. And it's a good metal cup or pot and a fire. I'm just saying. If things are bad in a survival situation, if you've got your metal can, a metal cup that you can acquire water in it and put it over a fire, a bed of coals, and boil water, you're in Fat City there. So, I'm just saying there's certainly a survival option for you, right? All right, that does it for today's show. You can check out all the links from today's show by going to AdvantageSurvival.com and clicking on the episode number 31 link. All right, if you have any comments or survival questions you'd like me to answer on the show, send me an email at les@AdvantageSurvival.com. You can also comment by clicking on the red Send a Voicemail tab on the right side of any Advantage Survival page. It's free. You can leave me a 90-second message there that I can use on a future show. So if you want to hear yourself on the Advantage Survival podcast, send me a comment or a question. And a big thank you to you, my listeners, for all your support. Again, I could not do this show without your support, so thank you. And please don't forget to rate and review the show on iTunes. It means a lot to me. All right, remember, have the advantage of survival in all your life adventures, and ask yourself, are you ready? Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.